welcome. Today I'm going to talk about how to create power and freedom in your life and business. And there's a distinction I want to talk about, which is the distinction between owning or having full ownership in your life and your business versus just doing or avoiding doing things that you think you should be doing. It's a difference between doing things and really owning your business and your life. So, one of the things that you could say are characteristics of doing is when you only operate on your to-do list, on the things that you feel you have to do. And that's not bad. However, if you are doing things and you're resisting doing things, or you're blaming other people or you're complaining, then that could be um, a bit of rat in the woodpile, or pretty suspicious in the sense that you may only be doing things rather than owning. More to come. So, what else, distinguishes the doing domain? Well, when you have an employee mindset, again, nothing wrong with being an employee, but most employees in their mindset, when they leave work, they don't have to bring the company with them. Uh, and I'm not saying that as a business owner, you got to bring your company everywhere you go. However, there is a certain ownership that even employees can have in their company where they are committed to getting something done regardless of just putting in their 9 to 5. So I'm sure that communicates. However, I want to dig a little deeper here. The um, the the distinction between an employee or a person, regardless, who owns their life or their business versus someone who doesn't, is when you see people blaming or complaining about stuff consistently, especially if it's the same complaint over and over. And again, I'm not saying this to diminish anybody or make anything or anybody wrong. No interest in that. What I have an interest in is the benefits of being able to own something. The benefits that, well, the downside of owning something is that you really have to put in a lot of, it could be potentially a lot of work. It may not, but it's more of a commitment and a willingness to put in the work and the proactivity to do what it takes to produce the outcome. So there's doing in it, but the being behind that is a willingness to do what it takes to make it happen. So, this is not theoretical for me. Last night I had a former neighbor who I haven't seen in a long time call me in the middle of the morning, about 1 o'clock in the morning, and she was really in bad shape. She could not walk. She was in the ER, emergency room, in a local hospital here. And, I could have easily said, man, I don't know how to help you. I can't do anything. But I made a choice to be highly proactive in the matter and to own my community, uh, and my relationship with my community. So I chose to help her. And I tell you, in the back of my head, I had all kinds of other thoughts going on. Like, I shouldn't be doing this. This is not my time. I got to rest, but I chose to own it completely. And I didn't shirk from it. And I stayed with her, even with her upset and everything, very understandable. And she had someone else she was caretaking that was left alone in the apartment. So we dealt with it all. It took a couple of hours. I was sleepy, tired, but I was willing to do it. Now, you could make an argument that, okay, I felt guilty about doing it, but there was none of that. It was just a commitment in the face of all the reasons I could have come up with why I shouldn't be doing it, to just choose and own or embrace my choice 100% with absolutely no complaint, right? So I think you're getting the sense of this. How does this apply to business and to life? Well, the first distinction in owning is that the buck really ends with you, whether you're an employee or a business owner or just in life or with children or whatever domain of life you have, whether it's relationships. Those of you who want to be in a relationship, pay heed because this is the difference between an extraordinary relationship where you own everything versus anything else. So the first sub distinction is when you declare or say that the buck, by buck, I mean the decision making power ends with you. Now, as an employee, you may have to consult other people, etc. But really, you're saying how it's going to go, and you're willing to do that. That's the key thing, right? So you're not, in an American terms or English terms, you're not passing the buck or the decision making power to someone else. You're willing to engage in the decision making fully, head on, with the business owner, or if you're the business owner, obviously you're doing it yourself. So the buck ends with you, right? Uh, this means that you have to make clear decisions and choices and be willing to own all the consequences of that decision, the time you have to put in, the the energy you have to put in. Because what's the point of making a decision if you're only gonna make it halfway or you're gonna do it half-assed? You know, you want to put your full behind behind the line, so you're willing to go at the start line when the starting gun goes off. You're willing to run with whoever's willing to run with you, and you may be the only one running. You better be willing to run. Because if you're not willing to run, then why make the decision? You see, you might as well not do anything. And that in itself may be a good choice, may be clear. I'm not going to do anything. Like last night, I could have told my neighbor that, hey, I'm not willing to do anything, and own that and own the consequences fully. Um, the third sub, so the second subdivision is the decisions and choices you got to make and owning it fully. The third is when you when you don't blame people, but really taking full charge of your decision, like we said. But there's a distinction here where you have to give up blaming people almost ongoingly, because your humanity will show up. Your human part will want to blame everyone or everything under the sun, and that's very normal. And you see, it's easy to get hooked by that and go down the dark path where you blame yourself or other people, or you question the decision, etc. All very human. But what you want to look at is that ownership has nothing to do with that. Ownership is still choosing, and choosing it fully. The fourth is when guilt shows up. And guilt is the complete antithesis of ownership. Now, you can feel guilt and still own something. If you choose to not pass the buck, if you choose not to be at the effect of your guilt, then you're owning it. Because when you become a high-level leader, especially, and I've worked with government leaders in the toughest of times, um, your primary distraction, or where people get weak, you could say, is when the guilt or other distractions come up from them fundamentally choosing and embracing their choices and their consequences. When you go down the path of guilt, what happens is guilt is fundamentally about declaring that something is wrong, or you've done something wrong, or you're about to do something wrong, or you will do something wrong, and nothing will atone for it. And that's the key part. Nothing will atone for it. And so there's a cost to that. The cost is obviously that you can't be effective with that. Because if you try to punish yourself or other people based on guilt, then it distracts and takes away from the focus of what should be the focus, perhaps, of your leadership. Again, regardless of whether you're an employee or working under somebody, or an employer or a business owner. And so when you go down the path of guilt, you actually end up in long-term suffering. When you go down the path of ownership and owning it and saying, what am I going to choose? You could choose really easily to not do anything and own the consequences. The distinction is really owning the consequences of your choice. If you decide to go down the guilt path after you own something, then that's not very effective, I assert. But if you decide to let go of the guilt and own what you've decided to do, then you're on the path of leadership again and ownership. So hope that makes sense. My invitation is to choose for yourself how you're going to do this, where you're going to stand. Are you going to stand in the path or the domain of ownership, or are you going to stand in the domain of doing and only doing what you need to do to cover your behind or to look good or to just do the bare minimum? And there are a couple of action items I'm going to leave you with. One is you want to list out, maybe on a sheet of paper, the areas where you're resisting ownership of your life or your business or your relationships or whatever else you're dealing with. You want to list out specifically where you're not really giving it 100%. Got to be willing to give it 100%. Otherwise, what's the point? Then you have what I call a near life experience. My invitation is to have a full life experience. The second action item is to list out the actions you need to take and you need to take in order to own your business or your life fully. There you go. I hope that makes a difference for you on this lovely Labor Day here outside. I don't know when you may be listening to this, but my heart goes out to you. When I speak from a position of experience and compassion. Compassion comes from experience because I've dealt with resisting ownership in my life and I've dealt with owning it 100% as well, especially in the most dire circumstances. Again, I'll reiterate that I hope this makes a difference for you. If you have any questions, feel free to share below in the comments. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to connect with us, and join us on our Facebook page. The link should be somewhere down here. And I look forward to serving you in the future. Take care. Have a great day.